Hello everyone, Prosperity here. The Legion is invading in full force, and we have lots of changes to the classes and specializations to fight back with. This series is here to help you sort through all the changes to get a better understanding of what's going on. Welcome to the core combat overview for the Fire Mage and Legion. This video is the first of three and will cover the core combat abilities, broken up into two parts, damage and utility. The core damage abilities are Dragon's Breath, Fire Blast, Fireball, Flame Strike, Pyroblast, and Scorch. The core utilities are Blink, Counterspell, Frost Nova, Ice Barrier, Polymorph, Slowfall, and Spell Steal. Let's get this show on the road with the core damage abilities shown on screen. These 6 spells are the bread and butter of your spellbook. Learning what they do and how they should be used is the first step on your road to mastering the spec. First up is Dragon's Breath. It's instant cast with a 20-second cooldown, and activating it deals fire damage to all targets in front of you within a 12-yard cone. Any enemy hit by the spell will also be disoriented for 4 seconds, with any damage on a dazed target canceling the effect. The spell is insanely useful in AoE situations, but can also be used as a secondary interrupt in single target situations as well. Fire Blast is another instant spell, dealing fire damage to a target. The spell comes with 2 charges and a 12-second recharge, is off the global cooldown, and can be cast even if you're in the middle of hard casting a spell. This spell will always critically strike, which is really useful for the overall gameplay of the class. With your passives, this spell has some interesting interactions with Flame Strike and Pyroblast, which I'll go over in the next video. Fireball is your first hard-casted spell and is considered to be your main filler for when everything else is on cooldown. This spell has a base cast time of 2.2 seconds and deals a moderate amount of fire damage to one target. Flame Strike is your main AoE spell. It's cast by placing it with a ground reticle and has a 4-second cast time. Once cast, all enemies in the area will take fire damage and have their movement speed reduced by 50% for 8 seconds, which can be really useful for kiting ads or just getting away from some enemies. With the Hot Streak passive, which I'll go over in the next video in detail, you can get an instant cast on this spell after critically striking twice in a row. Pyroblast is your other hard-casted single-target spell. It has a baseline 4.5 second cast time and only deals a little more than double the damage of Fireball. This sounds great, but with the mechanics of the class you will almost never hard-cast a Pyroblast without a few other things happening first. As with Flame Strike, you can get this spell to be instant cast through the same mechanic. Scorch is your weakest spell, costing the lowest mana of all your damaging spells and dealing the least amount of damage. It has a 1.5 second cast time baseline, but can be cast while moving. The spell will almost never be used unless there's a particular mechanic that will require you to be moving continuously for a prolonged period of time. Now that we've gone through all the damage abilities, let's take a look at the core utilities. These 7 spells won't really do much to increase your damage, but are very useful in keeping yourself alive and giving your team a tactical advantage. After you've mastered the core damage spells, learning the utilities will take you one step closer to mastering the spec. Blink is your mobility spell, instantly moving you up to 20 yards forward if there isn't anything in the way and freeing you from all stuns and movement impairing effects. The spell has a 15-second cooldown, so you should feel free to use it as much as you like, even just to reposition yourself preemptively. Counterspell is your interrupt ability and comes with a 24-second cooldown. Using the spell against an enemy that is casting an interruptible spell will stop their cast and lock them out from casting another spell in that school for 6 seconds. This can be useful for dealing with certain mechanics, but since it has such a long cooldown, you should coordinate with the rest of your team so that the spell isn't wasted. Frost Nova is an instant spell on a 30-second cooldown that deals nominal frost damage to all targets in a 12-yard cone in front of you. The spell will also root all affected enemies in place for 8 seconds, but damaging them has a chance to break them out. Between this, Dragon's Breath, Flame Strike, and Blink, you have the ability to kite mobs for days. Ice Barrier is a defensive utility that comes with a 25-second cooldown. It can only be cast on yourself, and when used will put a hefty absorb shield on you for 1 minute. While the shield is still active, you will not have your spells pushed back by damage. You should use this ability as much as you like, but pay attention to the remaining time on the shield as it's coming off cooldown. That way you can reapply it as soon as the current shield is broken. Polymorph is your primary crowd control ability. It has no cooldown and comes with a baseline 1.7 second cast time. This spell can target one beast, humanoid, or critter at a time, and a successful cast will turn the target into a sheep for 50 seconds, with any damage on them breaking them out of the transformation. A polymorph target cannot take any actions, but will heal up very quickly, so try to use this on high health enemies to take them out of the fight while you deal with the rest. Slowfall will almost never be used in combat, but there are encounters in which it's useful. Casting this on a group member or yourself will slow the target's fall speed for 30 seconds, or until cancelled. The only time it will be useful in a fight is if there is a mechanic that throws people into the air, in which case casting this on them could save their life. Spell Steal is an instant spell that takes one beneficial magical effect from an enemy target and gives it to you for no more than 2 minutes. Not all magical effects are stealable though. This spell costs the most mana out of all the spells you have, and will use the mana regardless of if you get an effect or not. It's not as much of an issue in solo play, but in a group setting you should make sure to do your research on which effects can be stolen and use the spell accordingly. Let's recap. Start off with your Pyroblast, get your Fire Blast and Dragon's Breath in, and cast Fireball to try to get your hot streak going. In AoE situations, replace Pyroblast with Flame Strike and continue on as you would in a single target rotation, always targeting the lowest health enemy. You can also replace Fireball with Scorch if you're needing to move continuously. Keep your Ice Barrier up as much as possible without wasting it. Work with your group to make sure that the proper enemy spells are being interrupted. Keep some distance between you and your enemies with Frost Nova and Blink, and use Polymorph when there are too many enemies to handle. Lastly, make sure you do your homework on what you can spell steal so that you don't waste it. Follow these rules and you should be well on your way to dominating with the Fire Mage. That's all I have for the core combat overview for the Fire Mage and Legion. Hopefully with this video you've gained a solid foundation for the combat tools available to the spec. Subscribe to keep an eye out for the next 2 videos in the series covering your passives, cooldowns, and talents. Of course, if you have any questions regarding Fire or anything to do with Legion, feel free to ask me in the comments below or on Twitter @TheLoranzas. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have fun.